You're listening to an ASCI Lounge podcast.
This is Talking Supply Chain, where we tackle the most important supply chain topics and trends with the industry's best and brightest. Welcome back to the ASCI Lounge. I'm Monique Fenech from Australasian Supply Chain Institute, and joining us on the ASCI Lounge today are two gentlemen I'm very proud to be in the company of, Gary Pearce and John Westerland. Westy, welcome to the ASCI Lounge, Gary and John.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thanks, Monique. Good to be here.
Thank you so much. By way of introduction, Gary Pearce is Senior Principal Consultant at Kinetic, and he's a registered practitioner in ILS with 47 years of experience in ADF public and private sectors. He's also the chapter president for Canberra for Australasian Supply Chain Institute. John Westerland, Westy, is Manager of Professionalisation at KBR. He's also a registered practitioner in ILS with 30 years of experience across government and defence, including project manager in Defence Material Organisation and 12 years consulting to Commonwealth, state and local governments. So it's a pleasure to have the two of you here today to join us. And what we're really keen to find out about is, what does ILS in fact mean? So to start us off, Gary, I'll address the first question to you. Thanks. What is Integrated Logistics Support, or ILS?
Thank you, Monique. Yeah, I'll start off. Firstly, many people might know ILS as IPS, that is Integrated Product Support, a term that seems to be gaining traction, particularly in Europe. So that's an area we need to be aware of. There are several definitions of ILS, but keep it simple. ILS is a scalable management discipline focused on cost-effective design, development, delivery, and ongoing operation of a support system. Probably a quick one. The ILS is a discipline and unified management of all activities necessary to produce a supportable system design and a reasonable support capability to achieve a predetermined set of measurable objectives within a acceptable cost of ownership. That might be a bit of a mouthful, but basically it addresses supportability throughout the life cycle of a material system. And I'll leave it there. So, John, have you got any more to add to that?
Yeah, I think you've pretty much defined it, but quite simply, it's the range of skills and techniques that we bring to a product system to make sure that it's supportable. It's not much point having a shiny new car if you can't put fuel in it, put tyres on it, maintain it, know how to drive it, and all those other things. So if you think of it along those lines, it's all that stuff behind the scenes that makes a product or a mission system, if you're in the military space, work and continue to work throughout its life cycle. That's what we do.
Yeah, right. So if a support system is so important in that scenario, what is a support system, Gary?
Yeah, John just alluded on to that a bit there. It's as a product or a mission system, like you use a car or a plane or a plant equipment. So that's the mission system. The support system is everything that goes alongside that to allow it to be operated, maintained, modified, and otherwise available, do its job when we need it to do it. It includes setting up systems and supply chains that provide fuel, oil, maintenance, train operators, maintainers, inventory, purchasing, warehouse and transport systems engineers can test and validate performance and safety, right down to technical publications and the collection of analysis of operational data essential to measuring and understanding system performance. Bit of a mouthful, but basically the support system needs to be consistent with the I'll go back one. The integrated part ILS comes into, so it has to be wholly integrated. In simple terms, a support system is the organisation of hardware, software, material, facilities, personnel, processes, data required, enable a mission system to be effectively operated and supported so the mission system can meet its operational requirements. As mentioned before, the whole of the life cycle, so from the beginning to the end. So I'll throw back to John. Is there anything more you can add to that?
No, that's the almost straight out of the textbooks there, Gary. But yeah, you're right. It's integrating all the things that allow us to operate, modify, maintain, deliver training, and all the supply support stuff to purchase the correct spare parts, to make sure that they're going to fit when we get them, all of that stuff. So it really is a systems engineering discipline that, from defining the requirements of what you want the support system to do so that the mission system is going to work for X number of hours a day or whatever it is, right through to delivering it, testing it, proving that it works, and then making sure that you continue to use it for the next 30 years the way you expected to use it. That's the game. And it's no use going and buying a new car if you can't use it after the first tank of fuel's run out.
Yeah, exactly. So John, just on that point, so when is ILS applied? Is it right at the very start of the product or system launching? When does it kick in?
Yeah, so it's because it's a system, it's systems engineering. You apply it across the entire life cycle of any product. So right back in the early days, when someone has a bright idea that they want a new shiny toy, an aircraft or a piece of plant equipment or whatever, they've also got some idea of what they're going to use it for, what its operating profile is going to be. And therefore, at that point, while they're working out what this shiny new toy is going to look and feel like and what it's going to do, the ILS team are sitting right alongside them going, well, this is what it's going to take to keep it alive. This is what it's going to take to have maintainers and operators that are going to use it without breaking it. These are this is how much it's going to cost you, and this is the important bit. You've got to do all that early planning, because in the end, whatever we do has got to be cost effective, and you're not going to get it through your sponsor or your board if they can't be guaranteed that they're going to get a return on investment on what they're spending on your support system. A lot of people go and buy the shiny new toy, but they'll forget about, what's it going to take to put fuel in this thing, or to put tyres on it, or to maintain the software that goes into it. How are we going to update that in 5 years' time when Microsoft changes their operating systems? All of that stuff is considered up front. And then you follow it right through the life cycle to make sure that, you can continue to use that piece of kit the way you intended to, for as long as you've got it, or as long as you want to have it. That's probably more important, because quite often things become unsupportable before they've reached the end of their natural life, and you end up putting your hand in your pocket to go and spend another few $1 million to buy a new toy, product that you didn't need if you had a support system that continued to look after it. Yeah, and Gary, you anything more on when we apply ILS?
Covered in completeness there. Probably in very simple terms, it influences the design or influences the selection of a product or a capability right through its whole life cycle. So end of the day is, as I say all the time, supportability. So as long as a product, a piece of equipment can be supported, that's what ILS is really trying to do.
And probably, one final bit, you apply ILS in, I think of it in two ways. You're either designing for support, where you're assisting or influencing the design of the product to make it more supportable, so it's more reliable, easier to maintain, quicker to maintain, whatever it is. But sometimes you'll end up with a product that you don't have no influence on that. So in that case, the mindset of the ILS practitioner shifts from designing for support to supporting the design. So then it really does go, well, this is what we've got. We can't change that. What is the best support system we can design, develop, and maintain to look after whatever the given product is? So, two mindsets as you move through the life cycle of a product. Are you designing for support, or are you supporting the design? And that's a simple way that I try and look at things. So when I go into a client space and they're asking me to do some ILS, whatever that means, I quickly try and get myself into the mindset. Am I designing for support, where I'm influencing the design of the product? Or am I supporting the design, where all I can do is design a support system to look after that piece of kit?
Yeah, fascinating. Thanks so much, John and Gary, for that. Well, why it sounds very important to me. So the question, why is ILS important, is a little redundant. I think you've already talked specifically about how it is very important. But can you talk to that a little bit, Gary?
Yeah, I think as John and I have covered in previous areas where it's important, but probably the key factor, ILS was born out of defence in the US in the just after the Second World War. So basically the 50s, 60s, because they worked out that support model alone was ineffective and inefficient. So they needed a method of ensuring that you could support a capability, a product, a system, etc. So that was born out of that. So all ILS considers all aspects of support, so operations, engineering design, maintenance support, supply support, training support, and all the other enablers and capabilities in the ILS element stream. So that's it. But in very simple terms, ILS is important because it must meet the supportability, cost, and preparedness requirements. So that's how ILS is achieved and why it's important, because and particularly in defence, a product or a capability might be in service for 20, 30, 40 years. So the acquisition might take 2 to 5 years, depending on the size of it. But the support of it is 20, 30 years. So there's a lot of thinking from the beginning and to maintain that support. And in the supply chain, you can say obsolescence is a big thing. The item's going to go out of stock or out of production, etc. So ILS is an important and the integrated part, especially in supply support and maintenance support. Anything else, John?
Yeah, and I think you hit on it when you talked about cost effectiveness, because in the end, business and we're in the game of making money or saving money, and it's almost become a truism now that you will probably spend about 25%, 23 to 25% of your life cycle costs buying the product, and about 75 to 78% on looking after it through its life. So, if you simply looked at buying a car and you go and spend $50,000 on buying a car, by the time you register it every year, you put fuel in it, buy tyres, get it serviced, over 20 years, that will probably cost you about another $175,000, $180,000. And most people don't recognise that. They just go, I've got a $50,000 car. No, you're actually making about $250,000 worth of investment over the next 20 years. You just don't realise it yet. So getting that cost as low as possible by having a good support system is critical.
Yeah.
That's why it's important.
That's a good analogy. I think we're all reaching out to our hip pocket right now, going, "Ooh." Okay, so this is a really interesting question for our members. How do you get ILS skills? Because I'm sure there's some members listening thinking, "This is fascinating. This area of supply chain that I just didn't even consider before." How do you get started, Westy?
Well, that's not an easy question to answer, because there's so many disciplines that need to be brought together to allow the design, development, delivery, and maintenance of a support system to go on. Defence used to do it very, very well in the 80s and 90s when guys like Gary and I were trained. But then training costs money, and that money needed to be redirected, and those skills have atrophied. But we have seen the last 3 or 4 years a lot of defence industry players reinvigorating that. But you could come anywhere from, if you're an inventory manager, purchasing officer, whatever. That's in the supply chain part of it. You've got maintenance engineers that are working out how things can be maintained and what those tasks are, and documenting all that sort of stuff. So you can come from a maintenance background. You can come from a design engineering background where you're working on reliability and maintainability and testability of products. You could come from an education background where you're working out how am I going to train people to use and maintain this piece of kit and operate the support system. There's lots of different pathways to get into ILS, but everyone's got that same focus of coming up with a cost-effective, to meet the cost-effective preparedness and operational requirements of whatever that system might be. So, but there is training coming. It is being developed. The Australian Skills Council have put in a bit of effort in the last year and a half to get stuff ready, particularly as we're moving into the shipbuilding program and the Future Submarines program in South Australia. And yes, some of us old greybeards are getting dragged into that more and more to try and reinvigorate that training. Gary, what have you seen on the training front?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The skills, getting the skills is, especially in the last few years, have been a bit light on. ad hoc, fragmented, trying to get the right people. Companies like ours, John's KBR and mine Connect, we're doing a lot of internal training of people, so getting people up to speed and trying to get them onto ILS tasks, etc. And as John alluded to, the Naval Shipbuilding College is now starting to look at training and skills. Defence in CASG have material logistics ILS, same thing, training, but it's a little bit ad hoc for a while, but it's slowly getting there. But the skills are there. But a lot of the skills at this stage is on the job training or on the job experience, and we're heading that way. And hopefully in the short term there'll be a lot more ILS practitioners out there, because they're a bit of a shortfall at the moment out there in the industry world.
Yeah, well, I know both of you are registered practitioners in ILS through Australasian Supply Chain Institute's registration and professional accreditation scheme. So we'd like many, many more to come forward and register so that we can create a community within ASCI of ILS specialists. So both of you are speaking.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I'd like a lot more people to get into this game and understand it, because I would like to retire soon.
John,
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
after all those years?
Yes.
Well, you live in Queensland, so I can see why you'd want to do that fairly soon. So both of you are speaking at the ASCI conference coming up in end of July, 28, 29 July in Western Sydney. So I'll start with you, Gary. What can delegates expect to hear at ASCI 2021 on day 2? So there's a dedicated ILS stream.
Yes, thanks, Monique. Probably a little bit more on this ILS stuff we've been talking about. So what we touched on. So we'll get into it a little bit more in the time. Look at the origins of history of ILS career pathways, opportunities, ILS professionalisation streams. I think is the big one on the round table. Future ILS directions and ILS training prospects. So we've covered them briefly today on the podcast. So we just want to probably just elaborate a little bit more on, and obviously, hopefully, some people ask questions and we can answer the questions.
Yeah, fantastic. So, Westy, what about you? What sort of delegates do you think should join that discussion Gary's talking about?
I would love to see key decision makers in the room, because one of the banes of our lives as ILS practitioners is being called in too late after decisions about what the mission system or the product is going to be. Once they've made that decision, your support costs, and like we said, it's about 75% of the total whole of life costs, are locked in. There's nothing we can do about it after you've made that decision. So if those senior decision makers are involved early and they come to the conference and understand what ILS is and what it can do for them and what those cost benefits are going to be if they stand up an ILS program before they commit to a product, our lives would be a lot easier, and a lot of money gets saved through the life of the product. So that's my personal wish, is those decision makers turn up and understand what it's about. And then of course there's also the people that we'd like to see grow and develop behind guys like Gary and myself and others that are still around, as to come in and go, you know what, I've been doing inventory management for the last 20 years, and who has decided how many of these spare parts I need to keep on the shelf and what those reorder points are going to be, and why are they being returned when the configuration's not being maintained or managed? Bring them in behind us, because that's the next step in their career from being a maintainer or an inventory manager or a purchasing officer or whatever it happens to be, a trainer, to come in and just understand what the wider world of ILS and conducting a logistics support analysis could mean for them, because there is a career coming. There is a future for them as well.
Gary, last words from you?
Yeah, I think John hit it on the nail. I concur all those comments. So we need more of us, preferably younger type us, to come in and lead and help set up organisations for this ILS support. So yes, that's what hopefully we'll outline during the conference.
Yeah, fantastic. And for you listeners at this podcast, in the blurb, there are hyperlinks to the conference website where you can have a look at the program in more detail and, of course, buy tickets. Westy, Gary, thank you very much for joining us on the ASCI Lounge today.
Thank you, Monique. We're looking forward to the conference.
Yeah, so that's what we're looking forward to. So hopefully we'll do a better job at the conference.
Oh, of course you will. We'll see you there.
Right.
And thanks, ASCI members, for joining us on this podcast. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening. Subscribe to our podcast today. For more information about our supply chain community, visit asci.org.au.